Here we go again. Hi there, and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my kitchen to another Cast Iron Wednesday. This is my third live, I guess you could call it chat here on my channel, Cast Iron Chaos, and thank you very much for everyone who was interested enough to show up. As I think I've mentioned, this has been something of a tradition, or become something of a tradition among the smaller cooking groups all across YouTube, and that is, of course, Cast Iron Wednesday, where people do stuff in cast iron. And the larger cooking channels don't seem to do too much about it, which is a shame, actually, because here I love what people do on these smaller cooking channels. I mean, the professional ones are nice, but I really like the home, the down home of all of the smaller channels, and I hope I could be considered one of those. So, all right, enough of that. Again, we are here for Cast Iron Wednesday, and the subject for this evening, I guess, is really for seasoning cast iron, because this is one of those eternal subjects that people will talk about forever when it comes to cast iron cooking. Cast iron cooking and cast iron cookware and cast iron collecting, because I mean, seasoning and cast iron, they go hand in hand, of course. I mean, you're whether you only have one small modern pan that you bought at Walmart, or whether you have a rather extensive cast iron collection, well, that you are going to be doing seasoning of cast iron, because, well, again, that's how you keep your pans in good condition. And I guess that's why I should present this, which I have actually shown before on my channel. And this is my Birmingham Stove Range number 12 size Dutch oven. At this moment, the inside of it actually is not in the best shape, unfortunately. A little while ago, I made some stew, not tonight, but maybe a few days ago, I made stew in it. And while I did actually wash it out, I did make a mistake, and I did not actually grease the pan down after washing it. And so as a result, it's, again, not in the best condition, which means, of course, well, going to have to season it up, and hence we're bringing it out for this particular chat. Somebody, okay, Clay Gennard, I got that circle thing going on. I'm not sure about circles. Hello, Fireman Piper, Flatlands. Oh, lots of buffering. Oh, dear. And I can see why. Let me see what I can do about that. I guess he pulled it out again. Yep. Okay, I'm hoping this. Come on. There we go. Bring this in, and I'm hoping this helps to improve things. I'm trying to switch over to a direct connection. I apologize. I think we may have a bit of a delay here. Let me check one thing here on the set. Okay, we're good. We're good. Ugh. All right. Keeps going back and forth. Damn it. Oh, I think I know why. There we go. I hope. All right. That should be better, I hope. I've switched from Wi-Fi to a wired connection. So hopefully we've got better reception here. Apologize for that delay, folks. Maybe I should show you the reason for that little delay. And here he is right here. Meet Trouble, my little familiar who was summoned here about a month ago. He really loves playing with cords and wires, as it seems. So I think he may have caused a little bit of trouble with this connection tonight. Hopefully we will get along, even though he wants to be playful. I'll deal with you later. Okay. Now, finally, back to business. And again, I'm sorry this took so long. As I mentioned, when we were buffering there, this is my Birmingham Stove Range number 12 size Dutch oven, and we are good. We're not back to Wi-Fi. Okay. 12 size Dutch oven. I made some stew in it a few days ago, and while I did wash it out, unfortunately, I did not grease the pan down immediately afterwards. And so, of course, that means, well, we need to do some seasoning. And that's where we want to, that's where we get started on this, I guess. Again, we are here. Oh, yeah, this thing here, as I said, is a number 12 size, and it happens to be about 12 quarts in size, or 3 gallons. This thing is a real whopper. Number 12 being 12 quarts in size is more of a coincidence than anything else. They did not plan the size numbers of the Dutch ovens because of size numbers. For instance, a number 8 sized Dutch oven is your more typical 10-inch wide one, the one that has only about about 4.5 quarts, 4 to 5 quarts in size. However, the BSR in particular increased their size rapidly. So as a result, their number 10 is about close to 8 quarts in size. Excuse me again. Okay, I'm going to have to put him away. Sorry. I have to put him away for now. I'm sitting on the keyboard. There we go. Anyway, I'm sorry about the delays. Okay. As I mentioned, but the number 12 is probably the biggest size kitchen Dutch oven they made. They actually did make a number 14 size camp oven, and that is a lot harder to find. It is quite a rare piece, in fact. Not impossible, but pretty hard. Anyway, as I mentioned, we were going to be seasoning this. I should say as well, I am very much encouraging comments here, and not just him. Cute kitty, well, thank you very much. But also questions, in regards to seasoning cast iron. Gas, or like, for instance, John Vincent asks, gas or electric, what's your preference? I think my preference would probably be gas, even though I have yet to have the chance to live in a home with a gas stove. I've only been lucky enough to cook with gas once or twice, except when I go outside with a gas burner, that is. I mean, so I have an apartment with a fairly typical, cheap American electric stove, so I've done the majority of my cast iron cooking on electric, but as you can see, it can be done. Anyway, since we are going to be getting into some seasoning here, I guess, one of the things I had wanted to mention was, people, okay, excuse me, you get down, was that people use just about any kind of oil to season their pans. Some people use vegetable oil, for instance, to season their cast iron. Some people even use grapeseed oil. I like keeping a little container of Crisco here by my stove, especially for greasing my pans. I don't cook with that. I use that to grease down the pans after I wash them, which I should have done with this one as well. Or we could go for something more traditional, and that, of course, would be lard. And that's why this is about 2 pounds of pig skin. In fact, I got at a local Hispanic market, in fact, a meat market. And I was thinking of using this to render up some lard. However, having actually cut this apart, I am thinking now that there may not be that much fat in this, unfortunately. They did a good job with that. So I'm going to have to dig out some lard out of the fridge as well, because, well, you can still use this to make some chicciarones, aka cracklins. So I guess I will throw out a question for you folks. What do you like seasoning your cast iron with? So, like for instance, Andrew Bonifacio says I use Crisco, and yeah, Crisco is actually quite good for seasoned cast iron. One of the most popular videos on YouTube for this would be the one on identifying cast iron by the Culinary Fanatic, and he uses Crisco to season his. In this case here, I'm going to be sprucing up this pan. I'm going to be sprucing up this pan with a nice amount of lard, I think. And I better close the door before the smoke alarm goes off. There we go. So once we get this lard going in here, we will just throw in some pig skin and make ourselves some chicciarones, and also help to season the cast iron at the same time, because that's one of the great things about cast iron is that you can do both. If you cook regularly with a cast iron pan, it will build up the seasoning, of course, and that's the whole point. As I mentioned, seasoning cast iron here will give you a pan of the kind that, well, like your grandmother used to have, with lots and lots of seasoning on it. And somebody else says, I use Crisco and bacon. You know, they always say, what's the first thing you cook in with when you have a brand new cast iron pan? They always say bacon. And some people argue that while bacon does in fact have a lot of fat and grease in it, it may not be the best thing for cooking a brand new cast iron, because it also has a lot of sugar, and the sugar tends to caramelize, and that is what makes it. That's what makes bacon stick when you cook it, especially at a higher heat. So here for the cool cat. Well, I think he's now chilling in the other room. So I did have to close the door to keep the smoke alarm from going off. And somebody, collector 34.5 says olive oil. Well, olive oil, there is one difficulty with that, and that actually has a rather low smoke point. So it is entirely possible that olive oil may very well burn off very quickly if you use that to season your cast iron. So, well, again, there's nothing wrong with using olive oil. Maybe, for instance, for greasing your pans after you wash them. Actually, using it for seasoning, well, I might suggest a higher smoke point oil, such as corn oil or canola oil. Crisco essentially is hydrogenated canola oil. And yeah, the Black Cat and BSR make a good Halloween theme. Oh yeah, no, I'm thinking of that as well. I've got a couple of plans for Halloween. By the way, you may notice just simply putting this lard in actually is making this pan look much better, I would think. So I think we're at the point now where we can, well, do ourselves some rendering. Because of course, lard is rendered from pork fat. As I said, I had hoped this had more fat in it, and I may have actually chosen the wrong one. I believe I should have gotten more of a fat back type of pork skin. But we will see how this turns out. Simple way to make cracklins nonetheless. As Robert Krause says, don't use rice bran oil in spite of the high smoke point. I tried it and it flaked like crazy. Yeah, that's the other thing about some of these oils, including the ones that you hear about so much these days. That would be flaxseed oil. Flaxseed oil gained something of a reputation because of this rather stupid article published about 10 years ago, The Science of Cast Iron Seasoning by Miss Cheryl Cantor. That thing just went viral and has developed something of a cult following. Even though she called it The Science of Cast Iron Seasoning, there are several folks who have taken the time to really debunk a number of the points in that article. Nonetheless, it is still promoted even today by a lot of high-profile folks, even some of the more high-profile YouTube channels, as the way to season your cast iron. I disagree with that, and I do not recommend flaxseed oil for the reason Robert mentioned. It flakes like crazy. I did actually take the time several years ago to season a few of my pans with flaxseed oil. And while it did maybe take a year or two, the seasoning did just simply flake off, and I had to strip them and season them completely again. This is going to be good. It's pork. Well, thank you very much, VLXX. This is just pork skin. My hope is simply to render this into cracklins and see whether or not we get any lard from this. My real point in it, as I mentioned, is actually to help the seasoning with this pan here, because once I'm done, I'll drain off the extra lard, and really all I'll need to do after that is just wipe the pan down. I'm not even going to have to rinse it out. Just give it a good wipe. Plus, flaxseed gets sticky and gross. Not to mention the fact that it's expensive. I mean, really, a bottle of that so-called organic flaxseed oil can cost you, what, $8, $9? And you can't do anything with it. You can't cook it. It's not really meant for cooking. So you're spending all that money doing nothing but seasoning your cast iron with a coating that's going to flake off in a year or so. Whereas, on the other hand, a lot of folks, again, just use your more typical vegetable oil, Crisco, or one of the more specialized cast iron waxes they have these days. And that tends to last a lot longer. What year was that BSR made? Well, this is something of a hybrid in that the bottom here is actually a century. When I got this thing, I actually went looking for a number 12 size pot, and I ended up scoring not one but two. Both of them, including this one, are fire damaged. The other one was fire damaged to the point where it spun like a top, and I could not even keep seasoning on it. I've tried several times to season it, and the seasoning would not take from the very beginning. Never mind flaking off, the seasoning did not stick in the first place. This one is still fire damaged. It is actually still warped on the bottom, and it is it is a spinner as well, but not as bad. More importantly, seasoning does take to it, so I am using this one at least until that time, which who knows, could be years from now, when I discover a Red Mountain number 12 Dutch oven. There is a risk. The whole thing about why fire-damaged pans are risky and why you don't toss your cast iron into a fire to season it. You see, the metal on this pot was affected and permanently affected by the fire, which is one reason why it's warped. But it's also actually more brittle as well, in that someday, it could be tonight, hopefully not. It could be, again, years from now, but someday this pan is likely going to crack because it is because of the damage to its internal structure. So that's another reason why I'm looking for a Red Mountain Dutch oven to replace it. The lid, on the other hand, is in fact a Red Mountain lid, and you can tell because of these very big and very random pattern dimples on the underside. All BSR lids had dimples rather than spikes. Furthermore, this is actually if we look closely, we can see this is a handwritten number 12 on the bottom here. So this lid I acquired separately. I didn't pay too much for it. I believe I traded for this, in fact. I think it was a Wapik number 12 pan that I traded for that lid. So that's another reason why I want a Red Mountain lid, so that it will match the it will match the top of the or I want a Red Mountain pot to match the lid. Sounds funny, but I use spray Pam and some butter, guaranteed non-stick. Well, yes, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that either. Pam is, if I remember right, that's essentially canola oil, which is fine for seasoning cast iron. And Boiler Hunky Dude, hi, it's nice to see you again. Just seasoned an oven full tonight. I like to strip them down to bare metal. I don't know where it's been or how hard they've partied. Yes, that is the thing, and that is why we do recommend, if you do acquire a brand new, not brand new, but I should say an old cast iron pan, like at a flea market or yard sale or the like. We do indeed recommend stripping it down completely in a lye tank or electrolysis, especially so that you can indeed season it all from scratch. One reason now, as people usually say these days, and this is good, is there's the possibility of lead. Now, lead contamination, I will say, is extremely rare, and it's almost unlikely any pan you find at a flea market will be contaminated with lead. But I say almost. It does happen, and it has been known to happen, and that very small possibility you have to consider. But even without lead contamination, there is still, of course, the question, as he said, of where that cast iron has been. What we mean is, what if somebody had it in their basement or an attic for decades, and say mice or other critters used it as a nest and had who knows what in it before they took it out for that yard sale? So that in itself would be a reason to strip the pan. What if somebody used that cast iron pan, say, for cleaning or replacing their oil filter on their car? We don't know. And those are worst case scenarios, of course, and possibly someone may just simply have an old pan that may have nothing more than decades of seasoning from cooking, but we don't know. So yes, reseasoning cast iron is definitely something that we highly, highly recommend. Boy, this stuff here, I should say right now, is, I have to say, not looking very appetizing, is it? It's got almost like an octopus type of color. However, that just simply means it's not done yet. And yeah, I will say, unfortunately, there's not a lot of lard rendering from this. So regrettably, and that's my fault, I used the wrong kind of pork skin. I should have gotten more of a fat back rather than just this, which was actually scraped very well. So we're just going to have to keep working on this until it actually gets to the point where we got ourselves some cracklins. Snap, crackle, and pop. What are you making? Can you please re-explain? Well, I'm not really cooking this for eating, although hopefully we can eat it when we're done. The topic of tonight's, and that was, who was that? That was Andy Sherm, if I'm looking at that right. The topic for tonight, as we're mentioning, is seasoning cast iron. And this BSR number 12 Dutch oven did not look so great on the inside when I first took it out tonight, because I had washed it but did not grease it down or season it afterwards. My intention, therefore, had been to render some lard in this and therefore, help improve the seasoning. As it stands, the inside of the pot looks pretty good right now, doesn't it? This is essentially just pork skin. I had wanted to use this to render out lard. I'm not getting a lot of lard from it. It was stripped too well at the butcher's, unfortunately. So what I'm going to end up with, I guess, is if eventually, I'm not sure, maybe at this rate, it may take another hour or so. But no, I'm not going to stay online for another hour. But what I hope in the end is it'll get to the point where we've got ourselves some cracklins, some chicciarones, so the pork rinds that you buy at the store. Except these are the real things. The pork rinds you typically buy at the grocery store are not real pork. Fireman Piper, all good on newer cast iron. They tend to be thicker, but I've cracked a gate mark pan because it was thinner. Yes, this is true. Yes, that's maybe the disadvantage of the old vintage cast iron being so thin, is that it is more likely, unfortunately, to come across a cracked pan or even to crack a pan if we're not careful. Cast iron is not indestructible, unfortunately. It can happen with newer pans, but because they are so modern day cast iron is so thick and heavy, it's much harder to do that. Oh dear. Just saw something X-rated here. Well, I'm not going to comment on that. It's natural. So, but yeah, the other thing though with modern day cast iron, if you're not too careful, especially on an electric stove like this one, is that you may not crack it, but you could still warp it. That's one reason why with an electric stove top, I recommend never, and I mean never, heating up cast iron on an electric stove top at your absolute maximum stove burner setting. That can get your cast iron up to temperatures over 1200 degrees, and that is the point where it can actually ruin the metal and cause it to warp. So when I am cooking on my electric stove, I never heat my my stovetop burner to more than, say, perhaps 2/3 on the dial or so. I should have said I mostly play with vintage. All right, it's literally a delicacy in my area in Birmingham. Oh, pork fat. Oh, yeah, pork fat is a local food group. Yeah, you could say that. That's one reason why bacon is so popular, of course. This doesn't look so bad, I will say that. You know, maybe I should probably season this with like some salt and pepper. Give me just a second to grab that. Thank you for waiting. I'm not sure how that's going to affect the seasoning on this, but it'll help it to taste good. Nonetheless, as I mentioned, though, I mean, people use lard and pork fat to season their cast iron. They use other oils like flaxseed oil. There are also some small makers of cast iron seasoning now are coming out because cast iron has gotten so popular. There is actually a market for seasoning. I am still a fan of one of the first brands of cast iron seasoning, and that would be Crisby, which is essentially a combination of Crisco and beeswax. I still use that to season my cast iron. I know that a newer competitor has come out, Buzzy Wax, and that is all the rage, it seems like, among cast iron collectors. Well, that's how competition goes. And while I know the guy who does Crisby, I can only hope he's doing all right. That's some nice looking lard fat. Well, I certainly hope so, because that's actually the whole point. As I mentioned, the real point of this was, in fact, to help beef up the seasoning on this pan. And that's a good thing, too, because in about a week or so, I'm going to be doing the same thing. Not just here, but I'm bringing out the big 19th century 15-gallon cauldron and getting that ready. Ready for what? Well, in about 2 weeks or so, I'm going to put together, well, a Halloween video, which will involve a nice cast iron cauldron. But to do that, of course, I'm going to have to re-season the cauldron once it comes out of storage. And doing what I'm doing now would probably be a good way to do that. Excuse me. Oh, I thought I was going to sneeze there. At least I will say this stuff is curling up, and it is starting to shrink, so we're not doing too badly here. Considering this was originally supposedly about 2 pounds of pork skin. I was hoping to get a lot more lard out of it, but at least we're getting some. However, this does still have a ways to go yet before it's actually crisp enough to become chicciarones. Breakfast food without cast iron is a sin. I use Bob S. I use an old Taiwan Dutch oven for cooking everything. The high walls keep the splattering down, and I don't spill much when stirring up the food. I got a chef skillet for frying an egg. Oh yeah, now there's one of the great reasons for a bare iron Dutch oven is that not only is it great for actually cooking, like baking or roasting or broiling in the oven or even on the stovetop, it is in fact a really good deep frying pan for that reason. It helps really good at cutting down the splatter. That's one reason why, again, if I would recommend anything for a person's first cast iron cookware, well, number one would be a 10-inch skillet, because you can do anything with a 10-inch skillet. Number two, I would probably recommend a bare iron Dutch oven. Number three after that would probably be a 12-inch skillet, and number four might be an enamel Dutch oven, maybe. But that's where your own preferences come in. It depends on what you feel you need to use. I know when I was starting out learning how to cook, my first cast iron was, a 10-inch skillet from Lodge. And then after that, the first cast iron I actually acquired or bought for myself using an Amazon gift certificate was my Lodge 14-inch wok, which I still have and I've used in a number of videos. Back in the day, the seasoning just comes from use. A high-fat dish is perfect, but it was always with the intention of eating. That is true, yes. That's really the best way to keep your cast iron well seasoned, and that is to cook with it and to use it. In this case, as I'd mentioned, or even if you scroll back to the beginning of this video, you'll see that the inside of this Dutch oven was not in the best looking condition. Now it's certainly looking a lot better, isn't it? Which is why when this is done, I'm going to just scoop these out, put the lard back in my metal grease container, and then just wipe this down. I'm not going to rinse it out. Just give it a good wipe, so that it's not sticky. But that alone should give it a nice coating of seasoning, and it will be ready, for the next time we use it. Okay. Well, as I mentioned already, this is for, okay, we've gone through seasoning of cast iron with flaxseed oil, with lard, with bacon grease, with even with crispy. I guess one thing I should mention as well would be, the methods used for seasoning cast iron, in that I think it was the culinary fanatic who really came up with the method of seasoning cast iron in stages. I think before his video came out, it was pretty simple. You season your pan just by coating it with grease. You stick it in the oven at like 450 degrees for an hour, and you're done. And there's nothing wrong with that. But he went over the top and started out with the method of preheating your cast iron to 200 degrees. Then you coat it with your seasoning. Then you wipe it off. Then you heat it to 300 degrees. Wipe it off a second time. Heat it to 400 degrees. And leave it there for 2 hours. And that seems to be actually a very reliable method. In fact, that's pretty much the method I like using on seasoning my cast iron as well. It is something of an all day or all morning or all afternoon process. But the end result is certainly worth it, because you've got cast iron with seasoning much better than what you buy at the store. And yes, that would include Lodge's seasoning as well. I mean, we love Lodge cast iron, and I know Lodge's pre-seasoning, they've made themselves famous for it, because that's what really brought Lodge away from the brink of bankruptcy about 10 years ago. However, simple fact is the factory seasoning is decent. You can cook with it right when you bring the pan home from the store, but it's not the best. Cooking will, of course, add more layers to the seasoning, and that's the best way to do it. On the other hand, a lot of people do like to take a brand new store-bought cast iron pan, strip it down completely, and season it themselves. Andrew Beneficio again. I've been watching you for a long time. Well, again, thank you very much. All I can say for that is, as this is really just a fun hobby that I got into. In fact, it was just about 10 years ago that I discovered it. And really, pretty much for most of this year, I've been celebrating like my 10th anniversary of all the crazy changes that happened in my life in the year 2010. That's why, among other things, this Saturday evening at about 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to be celebrating one of those major events that happened 10 years ago on that date, October 10th, 2010. Yes, the date was 10-10-10. And to celebrate that, I'm going to be cooking some fried chicken here on YouTube Live. And there's a story behind that, which I will tell you on that night, on Saturday night. Look on my channel for the live video schedule for this weekend, Fried Chicken and Bob. Don't like pre-seasoned pans, not right. Well, again, you can do what I do, and that is, of course, to just toss it in the lye tank, and then from there, just wait a good couple of days or so. It only takes a couple of days at the most for the large seasoning to be worn off, but in the lye, and then you are ready to season it yourself. I've got a bunch of stuff in my lye tank right now that I am going to have to take out and clean up and season for the fall. It's kind of like an annual fall ritual. Let me see, what do I have in there? I have a BSR fish fryer pan that I discovered a couple of weeks ago. I actually have a BSR number 10, a 12 and 7/16 inch BSR skillet that I'm very much looking forward to cleaning up and using. There's a popover pan, I believe, and a tin soldier cookie baking mold. So yeah, there are some things I'm really looking forward to cleaning up and using there. At least a couple of them will also be Christmas presents. Hint, hint, hint. Nice way to not spend a lot and get some really nice Christmas presents for family and friends. In my case, I applied so much cast iron on all my family and friends that they've already sternly told me no more cast iron for Christmas. Even so, since Lodge just came out with their cast iron pie pan, that may very well be a nice present under somebody's tree. Heck, it could be under your tree if you ask your significant other for it. Some of these pieces of pork skin are starting really to get to the point where they're getting close to being chicciarones. So yeah, we are definitely making some progress here. Really, the whole point of this was more for this chat than the cooking, at least this time. So I hope people don't mind me running off at the mouth like this. And Boiler Hunky Dude, sadly, my wifey now claims my number 14 Griswold is her favorite pizza pan. I cook with it on the stove using 3 burners, a big one. Oh, yeah, well, I don't blame you. I mean, when you've got yourself a number 14 size cast iron pan, as tempting as those Lodge and other pizza pans are, I find there may not be much of a use for it because you've got a number 14, and that is the world's best pizza pan. It's also the world's best turkey roasting pan once Thanksgiving comes in. And I have made quite a few giant 15-inch cookies in chocolate chip skillet cookies in my 15-inch BSR number 14 pan, which I call Stumpy. I've talked enough about Stumpy, but I'm sure folks are familiar with Stumpy. Hey, look at this one as well. Yeah, we are definitely making progress here. All it takes, as always, is patience. And again, for the record, I do have this cooked up, heated up nice and hot. It's like on a 1 to 10 setting on my stovetop. I have this stove set at maybe about 7 to 8 or so, because that's really all you need to get your cast iron blasting hot, good enough to sear steaks, or well, make cracklins. Bob S. I use a 10 and 5-inch Dutch oven, 9-inch chef skillet, and a number 8 Wagner griddle for all my cooking. Got about a dozen others hanging on the brick chimney behind the wooden stove. Okay, great. If that Dutch oven actually says 10 and 5/8 inches, I'm thinking that's probably a BSR. I think they are the only ones who put those exact measurements like that on their pans. So that's definitely a prize there, and I do hope you get a lot of use out of that. What about a 14-inch Griswold on the grill? Best place for it. I mean, after all, as he said, he has to use his number 14 on 3 burners, and well, the heating is uneven, unfortunately. Whereas on the other hand, on the grill, you can get some nice even heating on a big pan like that Griswold number 14. So yeah, using it on the grill is highly recommended. I never thought of the number 14 as a pizza pan. Does it really turn out good? Well, let's just say that when you've made pizza in cast iron, you may find those pizza takeout delivery bills going way, way down. Especially if your kids make it with you, because they're a lot more willing to eat what they make themselves. And I'll say again, with a number 14, not only is it the world's best pizza pan, it's also the world's best turkey roasting pan. Hint, hint, hint. After all, what are we seeing in the next couple of months? I've got a couple of videos for making a roast turkey in my number 14 BSR as well. So that's another thing I highly recommend. It's far, far better than those worthless aluminum foil roasting pans that some people use to make their Thanksgiving turkeys. Those flat reversible griddles work pretty awesome for cast iron baking steel for pizzas and whatnot. Oh, absolutely yes. Okay, well, thank you very much, Honey Badger Survival. Stamped Taiwan, I use it every day. Well, there's no reason not to. A couple of things, and I'll be very brief about this. I mean, I do understand that a lot of people frown on cast iron made in China or in Asia, such as Taiwan. Maybe for personal reasons, maybe for political reasons, and you are free to do so. I am not here to change anyone's mind. I'm not going to force my politics on you. But 2 things about Asian cast iron, Chinese-made cast iron. Number 1 is it is safe for cooking. You may not like it, but it is still safe. Modern Asian-made cast iron is not contaminated with lead. It does not have unknown chemicals. It is not made from spent uranium from Chinese nuclear reactors or anything like that. It is as safe for cooking as any cast iron pan. Probably much safer, in fact, than a lot of other made in China products that are of a much more questionable quality, like their TVs and their clothes, and especially their food and their so-called medicines. Their cast iron, on the other hand, has been made for like about 2,000 years, and it is safe for cooking. The other thing is that if you score yourself a nice-looking Chinese or Asian or Korean or Taiwan-made cast iron pan at a flea market or a thrift store or Savers or the like, well, the money that you spend on that is not going to go back to China, is it? It's going to go to the flea market or the thrift store. So it's not like your money is leaving the USA if you're buying Asian cast iron at a flea market. So for that reason, I consider it to be generally guilt-free to get an Asian-made cast iron pan at like a used place, like a flea market or thrift store. Again, if you feel you have a use for it, and I can say that about American cast iron as well. I have kind of broken that rule and gotten a couple of cast iron pans that I really don't need, but I'm glad I got them anyway, you know, like the 2020 Rosie the Riveter skillet. But that also goes for Asian cast iron as well. If you have a need for it, if you feel you could give it away as a gift, or if you can genuinely use it, then again, there is nothing wrong with going ahead and buying it. Politics, well, are not as important in that instance. Hey, do you use cast iron for chili? Oh, you can use cast iron for everything, yes. But what about will it turn the chili black? Well, it is possible that yes, it can do so if the pan is not well seasoned, and that's where we come back to seasoning again. This one, for instance, that I made, that I'm seasoning right now with this lard and these cracklins, the seasoning may not actually be good enough to make chili in, because the tomatoes in the chili, that can indeed affect the seasoning, and that's what will give it turn the beans a gray or black color that nobody likes. I'm going to have to use this Dutch oven quite a bit before I can make chili in it again. Which means, gosh darn it, I'm going to have to make more, I don't know, pulled pork or Brunswick stew or stuff in this thing. What a shame. Or more cracklins. And as you can see, these things are starting to get to be more like cracklins now, aren't they? They're getting close to that point, I might say. So, yeah, I'm quite happy. Some of these do not seem to be hardening up. It might be because I'm poking and prodding at them so much. This was 2 pounds of pork skin, but it does seem to have shriveled up quite nicely, I would say. So yeah, we are getting to a nice point here. Yeah, and as Miss French Twist says, yes, enameled for chili. Yes, I mean, that's one of probably the number one reason to get and use an enameled cast iron Dutch oven is because there's probably nothing better in the world for making dishes that use a lot of tomatoes or vinegar or both. You know, we're talking like spaghetti sauce, pasta sauce, chilies, some of the finer soups. And the like, all of that is probably the number one reason to get yourself an enameled Dutch oven. Probably more so than an enameled skillet. Here again, it's a matter of personal choice. I know that there are folks who use an enameled skillet all the time. I would definitely prefer a bare iron skillet over an enameled skillet. Although I will admit, I did have a Le Creuset, maybe an 8-inch Le Creuset skillet that I gave away as a present, and I don't regret that part, but I think I would like another one, if only so that I can do things like practice more omelets and the like on an enameled pan. As we age, we don't want the heavy pans so much. Well, that is unfortunately how life goes. In my case, maybe in about 20 years or so, I may be in trouble. Well, if that's the case, I'm going to enjoy every moment of it up until I reach that point, which is all we can do with any part of life, not just our cast iron cooking. A heavy pan isn't all bad. Less chance of warping, holds heat longer, and better arm muscles too. Oh yeah, no question about that. In fact, when it comes to doing things like searing meats for a steak, for instance, I prefer my modern thick cast iron. I would rather do a steak, for instance, in my Finex skillet, which is actually very thick and heavy, heavier than a Lodge. then I would do a Griswold, which is light. And I know some people have their own preferences. And again, I'm not pushing my preferences on you. Please use what you want. I'm saying that I myself would prefer using a modern, heavy, thick cast iron pan for making a steak. Because, as you say, I do believe it holds the heat better and does a better job searing. Probably the number one thing in the world to sear a steak in would be a modern cast iron pan. Okay, good. I use Dano Ozark. I use 20-inch Bayou Classic for a griddle. Yeah, I actually have not a 20-inch Bayou Classic, but I do have a 16-quart Bayou Classic, which I think is like about 15 to 16 inches across. I got that one because I had a need for a huge cast iron pot like that, and I'm glad I use it. That's another one I do bring out for things like jambalaya and the like. One other thing you can say about these makers of Asian cast iron like Bayou Classic is that, quite simply, like it or not, Lodge simply never made a Dutch oven or a skillet that size. Not in the 20-inch size or a 5-gallon pot or the like. Which is a shame in a way. I mean, I understand it does take a lot of energy and resources to make a 20-gallon cast iron pot. But if Lodge made a 20-gallon cast iron pot, well, I'm sure people or businesses would buy it. So who knows? You never know what we're going to see next from Lodge, especially since they seem to be coming out with new stuff every year at this point. Oh yeah, there you go. Watch this. Watch the first few minutes of this when it's posted. This nice pot didn't start looking so good. Yes, indeed, and that again is the whole point of this this particular session tonight: seasoning cast iron. That's exactly what I've been doing here. I have been seasoning this big old BSR Dutch oven by cooking up some pork skins and making some cracklins in it. And as a result, it's got a really, really nice coating now of grease on it. And we are getting to the point where these are looking like cracklins, aren't they? So once this is done, maybe after the video is over, with cracklins, it's like really, as you know, the crisper and the crunchier, the better. There's no such thing as too well done unless they burn into charcoal. But anyway, once this is all done, I'll take out the cracklins, pour the grease into my grease container, and from there, once it cools off, I'm just going to wipe this down. I'm not even going to rinse it because it's got a nice coating of seasoning now. And all I can do is keep using it and keep building up the seasoning. Let me point that out, I guess, as well, since you're doing it. This is my grease container that I found at Savers. I'm pretty sure it's aluminum. And if you're going to save your grease, which is not a bad thing, of course, if you're going to save your grease, you have to use a metal container. Some folks do use a glass container. I don't recommend it. Sooner or later, that glass container will shatter. It could happen when you pour some hot grease into it, for instance, and then you're in trouble. It might even happen when it's in the refrigerator, or somebody could drop it. So eventually, glass containers for grease are simply too fragile. And don't even talk about using plastic to store hot grease because, as you know, it will melt far too easily. So I very highly suggest that if you're going to store your grease, use a metal container for it. Find an old container at, again, a thrift store like, and you've got yourself, preferably one with a lid, and you've got yourself a nice grease container there. These are getting nice indeed. Yeah, like I said, since the whole point has been to season this Dutch oven, I'm not even going to flavor these things much more, or anymore, I should say. Once they're done, I'm going to put it into a big bowl, and then I'll pour over my seasoning. Maybe I'll coat them with Old Bay, for instance, because that would definitely give these things some flavor. Nonetheless, it does look like we are actually approaching the point where we've got some chicciarones. And VLXXXX. A romantic thought is the sound of a bell as the skins are stirred. This is an old dish. I imagine this sound has soothed many souls. Well, I don't doubt it. Especially since I've said this part before too. I consider cooking to be a form of meditation, because when you consider meditation, really is pretty much the whole point of calming yourself down, and I find it is a great way really to simply focus on what I'm doing, namely the cooking, to the point where I can really tune out the rest of the world, the noise, the chaos, the stress. It is a great de-stressor. I always feel much more relaxed and happy when I'm cooking. All right, and so much for the Psych 101 here. Did you do Brimfield this year? Regrettably, I did not. COVID kicked Brimfield's butt. Brimfield was canceled for spring. It was canceled again for the summer. And I'm not so sure if they held it in the fall. But by the time the fall came around, I was convinced that I think it was too much of a risk to go to Brimfield, unfortunately. Here's where politics get involved, unfortunately, and I'm not going to say really too much about it, other than I am pro-mask. Please, please wear your mask and keep your social distancing, even now, because people are still getting sick. And that's the reason why I decided not to go to Brimfield. I felt there were too many people all close together. There was really too much of a chance of getting infected there. And some folks, unfortunately, do not feel they need to wear a mask. And they have their reasons for that. I think they are sadly wrong. So rather than get into any arguments, and especially to keep safe, unfortunately, I stayed away from Brimfield this year. I am very much looking forward to going next year, though. For my boiler hunky dude, for my big pot, I use a round sheet of aluminum cut to size with a handle riveted on. Oh yeah, we're talking about a lid here. So definitely, essentially, whatever works. A lot of people have wooden lids, especially for their big pots. For that 15-gallon cauldron, I was lucky in that I found out that Bayou Classic makes aluminum lids for their jambalaya pots, and I found one that fits my cauldron perfectly, so I was very happy with that. And in a couple of weeks or so, I will be bringing that out. So I guess if you want to look forward to that, well, please do. I'm looking forward to having fun using that. Cooking is bomb for the soul, well, thank you. And okay, I apologize for bragging. I'm really trying not to. I make hammered copper lids for my skillets. Boy, that really sounds interesting. I'm wondering if you could show us a video of that. I wouldn't mind seeing something like that. All right, and as I mentioned already, the topic for tonight really has been seasoning. Okay, I guess, we are getting on in time, but I think I'll throw one last question out, and that, of course, is, well, tell me about some seasoning that you have done, whether it's with a new cast iron piece or an older cast iron piece, if it's your first time seasoning, or if you have, or if you do this on a regular basis, to the point where your significant other throws you out if you're going to be seasoning more cast iron. I'm glad to say the smoke detector did not go off here tonight. Yes, show us a video of the hammered lids, definitely. Also, I do hope that the lag stopped. Once I got this hard, direct wired connection plugged in, I think that helped to really kill the lag. These things are getting, I'd say we're just about at the point where these things are done. Wouldn't you say that? Check these things out here. We definitely are getting some nice hard, well, not hard enough still, In some cases, it's still soft. So I'm probably even going to keep doing this after the video is over. A few of these, nonetheless, you can hear it, are reaching to the point where we are getting ourselves some cracklins. In fact, if anybody has advice on making cracklins, please feel free. I mean, because again, what we do is we want these things as crunchy as possible. And I'm hoping just simply cooking this more will make them as crunchy as possible. But I mean, if there are tips regarding that, like maybe freezing them afterwards or the like, looks nice and crackling. Needs a little more time. Yeah, that's what I thought. As I mentioned, I'm guessing maybe it might even take as much as, I don't know, another hour or so. I'm not going to stay live all that time. Largely because it is a work night. It has been a long week. We're not done with it yet either. Boy, work has been crazy. Which is why, even though I've been doing these live videos, and I very much appreciate everyone who's showing up, this is one reason why it's been so hard to produce the more carefully edited videos. I have one right now that I'm trying to put together. I hope to have that out by tomorrow evening, for instance. So in addition to the live videos, I am still producing the regular edited videos. I hope that doesn't drive people away that I keep doing these live ones here. As I mentioned, I have another live video scheduled for Saturday night. It's because, of course, as you know, there's nothing to do on a Saturday night other than watch some geek cooking on a YouTube video. But yeah, you're right. Definitely more time, and we will have ourselves some cracklins. I'm retired. Keep going. Well, thank you very much, Pappy Dan. How often do you do live videos? Well, I don't have a set schedule. I know some people try to do it on the same night every week, and I have been trying to do this every Wednesday night for Cast Iron Wednesday. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way, partly because, as I mentioned, my work is a full-time job. I am a cubicle slave. I work at a corporation. And this job sometimes feels like it is 24/7. Even after 5 p.m., I still get calls that have to be answered. So it can be difficult to keep up a schedule also, especially since, well, as you know, real life interrupts as well. Unfortunately, there's family drama, sometimes personal drama, and these things, well, they happen. But I do my best to keep it up anyway. I've only recently discovered I've managed to successfully start doing these live videos. I think it's only within the last month or so. I mean, I spent literally years trying every so often to get a live feed to work, and it kept crashing. And the reason why is, up until recently, I was using my phone to film the YouTube live here. And the temperature alarm on my phone would go off after only a few minutes of cooking, and the phone would shut down or lock up. So I was getting unsuccessful live videos until I finally had the brains to set up a webcam next to on the stove here, rather than simply trying to use my phone. And the result has been, well, I hope, much more successful. You're doing once they feel a little crispy on the heat, they're done, and they crisp further off the heat. Maybe take the done ones out so they don't overcook. Well, I could do that. Probably not a bad idea. One or two of these, I think, maybe at that point. Yeah, so I mean, this is nice and sturdy here, not really crisp. I'm hoping that you are correct, and they will crisp up as they cool off. I am starting to smell something of a burning smell, so you may very well be right in that respect as well. But still, there we are. We have ourselves some chicciarones. And this is one reason why I very much appreciate living in a Latin American or Portuguese type of neighborhood. It's introduced me to a lot of things I think this one's going to go back. It's introduced me to a lot of foods that I never would have tried before, if not for living in with neighbors from Brazil, for instance. I never would have discovered dulce de leche or coxinhas. Oh man, do I love coxinhas. If you've never had coxinhas, you should really run and try some. They are what they call chicken croquettes, which is essentially chicken fried up in a dough with a breadcrumb coating. And it's very, very much worth it. Oh, we're off to a good start here. Here's a nice plate already of cracklins. Now that we have this, let's get out just a little bit of the Old Bay seasoning and lightly sprinkle them over our chicciarones. And I've got to say lightly because I know this stuff is pretty strong. It's probably enough right there. Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Oh yeah. For the record, I mean, it's one of the few things I really recommend going to BJ's Warehouse for. You get yourself a huge thing of Old Bay, much better than the smaller ones they sell at the regular supermarkets. Some of the stuff they have at BJ's, yeah, it's not really kind of a ripoff. No less expensive than what you buy at the regular store, but a few of their things make it worth it. Yeah, you're right. These things are definitely starting to get overly crisp here, maybe even burned, which means I think we are getting to that point. So I think it's time to turn off the heat. Keep on stirring these until they cool off, and then we will take them out. You can even eat them with hot sauce. Do you think you can warp a cast iron pan on an open charcoal fire? You probably can, but really the question, as always, is temperature control. I mean, charcoal may be less, let's say, uncontrolled than your typical campfire, which means that it's more likely to damage a cast iron pan throwing it into a campfire. Cooking over a campfire is fine. Coals, I'm hoping that the temperature would be more controlled with coals so that there's less of a chance that you could damage it. At least I would hope so. I mean, if you bury it in like 50 to 100 coals, well, I don't know what the temperature would be. I'm sure there are experts who might. So anyway, at this point, though, we are getting really to that point. I mean, it has been about an hour or so. I very much appreciate this. I hope folks didn't mind the way I rambled on like this. I mean, as I said, the subject for tonight pretty much was seasoning cast iron, and that is really what we did. As I mentioned, we seasoned up this old pot very nicely. So I'm looking forward to using this one again very soon. And then on top of all that, we got ourselves some cracklins. I also learned a lesson that when I get pork skin to season that big cast iron cauldron, I'm not going to get this stuff. I'm going to get more of a fat bag so that I can get more lard out of it. Nonetheless, once again, this has been an interesting experience. I've learned something here. As they say in South Park, I think I learned something today. And above all, though, I do hope everybody has enjoyed themselves. So I very much appreciate your time here tonight. I mean, thank you for just hanging out and chatting. I'm probably keeping this in the background, and I wouldn't blame you. But it's, as I said, these things are a lot of fun, and I can see why people do these live YouTubes so often. As I mentioned, they're easy to do, and yeah, again, they are fun. And I hope you folks enjoy it as well. So I think at this point, we are probably all set with Cast Iron Wednesday. Then, of course, there's always next week, and there's, who knows, there's a nearly infinite number of topics we could discuss in regards to cast iron, different brands of cast iron, the history of Wagner, the history of WAPEC or Favorite or Chicago Hardware Foundry, or we could just prepare ourselves another nice dish. Regardless, as always, I can say thank you everybody for watching. Very much, and very, very much appreciate everybody who has come to my channel, and I hope you enjoy yourselves. And really, I guess all we can say otherwise is, once again, thank you very much, everyone. Have yourself a good evening, everybody. All right. And thank you again, Pappy. All right. Good night, everyone.